Side note, if you've parked in the lot beside the building, please make sure you did not park in the pastor's spot. I guess someone did that the other time we were together, and so just a housekeeping, cleaning dynamic. Welcome to March, everybody, if you can believe that. We're 3 months in, and again, there's much going on, so we won't delay. Our function and our flow tonight is as follows. We're going to talk to PCRI regarding some down payment assistance issues, and then we're going to talk with the Oversight Committee in response to concerns that were articulated from our annual report. If you do not know, one of the things that we do is we do an annual report based on the activities of the year, and then we present them to City Council, our findings, how progress is happening, so forth. And we try to work out the issues during the year when we're together, which is why these meetings are so important and necessary. So thanks for being here tonight. I appreciate your time. We're going to honor it by doing our best to stay on time. So there will be opportunity for public engagement and or questions, public comment in 2 sections or 1 specific section right after we have the director of the Portland Housing Bureau, the interim director of the Portland Housing Bureau, responding to the questions we articulated tonight. If you have something that you would like to talk about, we ask that you sign up. There should be a space for you to sign up and put your name down, some information, and then you'll have 3 minutes to come and to share. Now, the goal and hope is that it's in direct relationship to what's on the agenda. However, if there are things going on that you are aware of, concerned about pertaining to affordable housing, we'd like to hear from you. And there are individuals that you can grab, talk to, or pull to the side before we exit the building, and those are people who work for the Portland Housing Bureau. So I'm going to ask everyone who works for the Portland Housing Bureau to identify yourself, lifting your hand nice and high, look around the room, and see those who are staff members of PHB. They'd be individuals worth grabbing. We also have Cupid Alexander, who is the mayor's representative. Thank you very much, sir. And he's worth pulling off to the side as well. So we are going to launch, and we're going to begin with Linda Tellis Kennedy, if you would come on up. You need another chair?
Yeah.
Good evening, ladies.
Good evening. Okay, so you're right. I'm Linda Tellis Kennedy with PCRI. And again, I just want to put on my glasses. Let's see. I want to say good evening to all of you, the committee. And I want to let the Oversight Committee know that I appreciate all of you taking the time to oversee and evaluate decisions being made by the City of Portland, decisions that impact the African American community who has been displaced and those that are hanging on to stay. As far as I know, we have not had this type of a watch since the Albina Ministerial Alliance. As strong as they were, decisions were still made here in the Albina and Piedmont area, most of which is now known as the Interstate Urban Renewal Area. These were decisions that negatively impacted the community by eminent domain, housing issues, and even school district issues. I want to encourage you all to continue to do what you do and continue with a sharp eye and a sharp ear for the grandparents, the parents, the aunts, and the uncles who fought so hard to have something that we still fight hard to obtain today, which is an unhindered equal opportunity of homeownership in the City of Portland. So with PCRI, my concern has been or is that at the October meeting that we had here, that PHB recommended an increased down payment of assistance in 2 in a two-tier proposal. And one was for $100,000 for down payment assistance, and the other was for $125,000 per unit for development of new constructed units. The proposal later that month that was approved by the mayor defined the tiers different than what was proposed at the oversight meeting. $125 per unit amount was limited to new permanently affordable units that were being developed or are being developed. So the next couple of slides is just to support what I'm saying and that had happened. That's a slide from the October meeting that says the increase of homeownership subsides for all current preference policy households and projects based on evaluation of financial need up to $100,000 for down payment assistance and $125,000 per unit for development of newly constructed, and I should have highlighted, newly constructed units. This would confirm that PHB's commitment to support 65 households access homeownership through the North-Northeast housing strategy. And then the next slide shows the letter that actually got signed maybe a couple weeks after that meeting. I'm not going to read all of it. It's pretty small, and it is, and you all included it in the presentation. But on the next page, I did want to show where's the highlighted part? So I did highlight on the letter that I sent that the third or the fourth line from the bottom where it says that this $125 per unit for the development of new construction units providing permanently affordable or permanently affordability home ownership. And so the people that come through PCRI, that's not the model that we do. And so the people who come through our program are being excluded from what they were told at that meeting, and also just what I had told some of them after the meeting, because that we have new construction. So because it's new construction, the 125 is needed just like it is for the other constructions that's permanently affordable. And I want Julia to just show this, support why we need that amount. And it's not we, it's the participants that are participating in the preference policy program. They need that money just as much as folks in the permanent affordable model.
So I just passed around, and I'm sorry, I think I'm one short, but I just passed around a handout of what's on the slides, since I know the slides can be a little tough to read in the handouts. So I wanted to make sure you could follow along. But as Linda mentioned, I just wanted to go over kind of what the numbers look like for our participants, the future homeowners that PCRI is working with. We had sent a version of this to PHB a couple of months ago, so I apologize if this is the first time that you are seeing this. This one does have some slight modifications to it to compare, to line up the 100 down payment assistance loan versus the 125 DPAL that we're talking about tonight. But in brief, on the left-hand side of your handout is essentially what was in the original proposal that PCRI put together back in November of 2015. This was looking at an average for a 70% AMI household. This holds true for the average households that are in PCRI's preference policy pipeline currently. And then the cost of construction was based on a total development cost per square foot of a project that PCRI had in the works at that point in time that was a similar size and scale and type of construction. And when it was completed about 6 months later, those numbers held true as well. To the right of the original proposal numbers is, again, the comparison from a 100,000 DPAL to a 125,000 DPAL. And you'll essentially notice that the big difference across the columns is that there's been a significant increase in the cost per construction. I want to emphasize how extraordinary this increase has been. It's been 30 to 40% increase since our original proposal. This is not normal. All of the experts and contractors that we work with, no one really perceived that we would continue to see the construction costs increase like they have. This has resulted in about a $60,000 per unit difference from our original proposal. And so, of course, then that translates to a gap for our homeowners based on what we thought was an effective and realistic proposal back in 2015 to where we're at now. So, of course, that increase to $100,000 certainly helps, and more money helps. But you can see that there's about a $40,000 gap per household. Then that still remains. When you bump that up to the $125,000 down payment assistance, then of course that decreases. There is still $20,000 gap, but I just want to emphasize that during this time, PCRI, of course, has continued to fight for the homeowners that we're working with to make this happen. This has been done through seeking funding from the state. This has been done by seeking funding from foundations. We've received recently a grant from our Memorial Trust, for example, and then also working very closely with our general contractor, architects, and then others, experts in the field to make sure that the homes that we're building are both meeting the needs of the homeowners, but also is efficient, effective design that, you know, we're not just blowing up the budget for the sake of blowing up the budget. And so just to summarize then, again, to recap kind of where we're at here, as Linda noted, one of the big concerns for us is that the homeowners that we're working with are just as deserving and just as in need of this $125,000 down payment assistance option as those that are working with others. When they signed up to work with PCRI at the onset of this project, the down payment assistance was the same. I just want to remind you of that. And so there is a concern of equity in terms of when you start changing who can access what based on who they've chosen to work with under different circumstances. And then, as I just outlined, PCRI clients are up against the same market impacts as others that are in the preference policy. This is not, the market is not choosing who this is impacting. And that even with the increase in DPAL, we are continuing to seek other sources to make this work.
And then also with that down payment assistance issue that came up, I just wanted to add to this that over the past 50 years, possibly even 60, Portland Development Commission, now known as Prosper Portland, and partially time with Portland Housing Bureau, has made a lot of plans, if not all, the plans for North and Northeast Portland areas of town. And there's usually a 10-year plan. Sometimes it's a 5-year plan. It's the 2020 plan, 2025, the 2030 plan. It's usually a 10-year plan, and those 10-year plans is what has caused the displacement, a lot of the displacement and a lot of the gentrification that we see now. And I don't know, it bothers me that the preference policy is only going to take a couple of years to be mortgage ready and to purchase a house. And that's just not realistic for most of the participants that are coming through this program or for the population that it's intended for.
And just to add on to Linda's last point, I wanted to really be here to acknowledge and at the same time celebrate one of our participants that closed on the purchase of her home last week. So we can all be excited about that. Yes, go ahead and clap. Go ahead and clap. I also want to point out that this young lady was a PCRI resident for a few years and had been enrolled in our program since 2013, which is just a great example of just how long it can take in some cases for people to become successful. So just wanted to reiterate that, as I know we will continue down this agenda talking about, some of those issues. But again, here's someone who had been plugged in and working for some time yet now, and just recently was able to be successful. But no matter how long it takes, as long as we get people to the end and to the finish line is really, really what matters. So thank you.
Thank you. So, to be clear, your ask for the Oversight Committee is?
That the 125 is across the board for newly developed units, just like it was proposed in October.
Thank you very much. Oversight Committee members, you've had some time to think about this. We brought it up in January, said we'd come back and talk about it in March. So, weigh in your thoughts, your questions, your comments.
Well, I have a question because we weren't all here in the last meeting when this came up, about how others on the Oversight Committee understood the recommendation at the time. Did this, I was not at the October meeting. I looked back through my calendar and confirmed that with myself, so I have no idea what the intention was in the conversation, and so I would love to hear from others about what they believe the intention was.
And I don't have a problem doing a quick polling of the Oversight Committee members and having everybody weigh in who was present at that meeting, whether or not you recall. So the question on the table is, do you recall the $125,000 increase for development being for permanent affordable units only? Do you recall that as part of the conversation? So I will need you to speak and not just and by speaking, I mean into your microphone, identify your name. I am so-and-so, and this is what I recall. If you'd be kind enough to do that, then I will go this direction. I, of course, as the chair, said it before, no, I do not recall it being a part of the conversation.
Good evening. I'm Virgie Ruiz. October, I'd have to go back and look at my notes, and I don't recall it being in there, but I can understand why you're asking the question now.
Good evening. I'm Marlon Holmes. We had a lot of conversations that night. I remember, though, I voted no on the proposal.
If I'm to be honest, I don't recall specifically. I could pontificate, but I won't. Sheila Holden.
Tristan Dallas here. I believe I was at that meeting, but I don't recall specifically that specific modification, that the increase was only for the permanent affordability homeownership. So, sorry.
Felicia Tripp, I ditto everybody else. I just remember the robust conversation, and I just remember Marlon said no.
Cupid Alexander and I had abstained from that vote, but I do remember the conversation.
Cupid, do you remember if it was brought up?
I don't remember if it was brought up or not.
Thank you.
I'm Karen Edwards. I don't recall that it would cause this kind of effect, but I'm assuming that someone is using an equity lens before we adopt policy. And so had we, maybe we would have noticed this. So I don't know if that should have happened prior to coming to this meeting or not. But
I do have to say one thing, Bishop. I made the assumption when I'm looking back that it was going to be available to all of the agencies under the preference policy. That was my assumption. I didn't know in my vote, and because I'm trying to really clarify for Lisa, I didn't know in my vote that would exclude one of the agencies in voting for the increase. I was looking at the increase as a way to get the money out on the actual street. I didn't I didn't realize that that exclusion would happen.
So I do see a clear, having not been at that meeting, I do see a very clear difference in the language from one slide to the next slide. Those clearly seem to have, there was a different modifying phrase there that wasn't in the first slide. I don't know at what point that happened. I think I would want to take the conversation back to perhaps the bigger conversation that we've had here. So we've had an ongoing set of issues around the homeownership work from the very beginning funding recommendation made by the subcommittee of this group, plus others who looked at the initial homeownership proposals, the recommendation made by the Oversight Committee, and the actual funding allocated. So if we go all the way back to 3 years ago, we had some dispute over the funding allocation not aligning with the recommendation of this committee. And it became clear through that this committee is not a funding committee, and this is not the final decision point for determining things about funds. We all accepted that. That was our charge. And I think what I would like to hear stated explicitly is, just so that everyone knows, like, where is the decision point and who are the people who actually need to hear this, a statement, whether it's from the Bureau, the Commissioner/Mayor's office, that there is a value-based decision that's being made in this funding decision to orient the funding toward the permanently affordable housing. I actually, personally, I support the permanently affordable homeownership model. Personally, I see it as something, I know that it's something that was created by African Americans in this country to create cooperative ownership and wealth. At the same time, that's a value. I understand why wanting to recycle subsidies has pluses. There's another value that we also weigh around closing the racial wealth gap and access to opportunities that have been denied for a long time, which is also an incredibly critical value I hold dear, and I know many people on this committee, and I have to say almost everyone that's ever spoken to me from the community has told me is their priority. So I don't need another explanation of why it's useful to spend public dollars in a permanently affordable model. I just want to hear someone say explicitly, we are choosing to value that set of benefits over this other set of benefits, and here's the people that you can go talk to and tell them that you would like a different value to be expressed in the way that funding is being allocated. Because it's clearly not this group of people, because our recommendations have not been followed in this matter.
And so let me weigh in to clarify, especially for those who are sitting and listening. Part of our responsibility and charge as the Oversight Committee and or any other committees that are comprised in the city is to either oversee, evaluate, and or advise on policies that get established. The only people who can put policies in place are the elected officials. Those are the ones who vote in policy. We recommend policy, we can oversee policy and make sure that what has been put in place then gets actually followed through with, which is what the second half of this meeting is about. But in terms of determining how dollars are spent or approving that, we make recommendations. Now, this committee is unique in that we are an oversight committee that then weighs in specifically on the things that are decided. So I wanted to elaborate on that point to clarify that while necessary to have these moments and conversations and for us to then weigh in, we then make a recommendation to our commissioners, city commissioners, and our mayor around that, and they can choose as they will.
I think what Bishop Holt had indicated was absolutely correct. So what happens is that the Housing Bureau comes, examines the recommendation of the Oversight Committee, and then presents a proposal to the mayor. At that time, the mayor either approves it or asks them for additional feedback or asks them for some interpretation. And at the end of the day, because of our system of governance, he has to go to the other commissioners and explain to them how this all works. So one of the problems that we have is that when we're going to other commissioners, they're asking additional things. And in all honesty, they have their own platform that they're working with. Because of our system, he has to get 3 out of 5 unless it's an emergency, then he has to get 4 out of 5. That's the political side of the conversation. That's the part that we're always having to navigate. So some of this is political. Part of it is that understanding what the role of the Oversight Committee is. I think everyone around this table understands how city processes work. I think maybe Shannon can speak to some of the numbers and things like that. I think that that's part of the clarification that not only PCRI would like to see, but I think the Oversight Committee members would gain additional, clarity around.
So, sorry, if I can just clarify, I actually don't want to know about the numbers. I want to know about the politics. Because I sat on a subcommittee which made a very strong recommendation to put the preponderance of funding toward a traditional wealth building homeownership model. I came to this oversight committee in which the oversight committee voted to do that. I see that we've continued to have a conversation in which people have supported that. This is something different. Right? At each step, there's been a person and persons. So is the problem, is the dispute issue that the mayor would like to see this be the funding outcome? Is it that there are other commissioners who want to see that funding outcome? Like, I think we just need to know what the decision point is, because the advocacy can be pointed toward the people who can make the decisions to do something differently. We can say the same, we could make the same recommendation again and again and again, but if the outcome is not changing because we are not the people who make the decisions, and we all know that. So where is it happening?
Like we said before, it's happening with the commissioners and with the mayor. So ultimately, they're the decision makers because none of us were voted in by any of the voters. Which
commissioners and or mayor preferred to move the funding toward one model over another model? Not a generic question of who makes the decisions. In this specific instance, where is the decision point happening that makes the recommendation? That's my question.
So, well, I want to weigh in on
that. Good evening. I'm Shannon Callahan, the interim director of the Portland Housing Bureau. Dr. Bates, this was a recommendation that came from the Housing Bureau with this particular structure. And it came to you in October, and it was based on a financial analysis of a project that is receiving new construction funds that is permanently affordable. I think our choice of verbiage here was an error on our part. So I'm trying to take ownership for that issue directly at the Housing Bureau. But I'd also like to point out, and I understand that there are a lot of issues of equity here, and I hope if I may answer a little bit or add a little bit more to this discussion for a moment. One of the crux of the issues, that if I may, is we are not trying to treat folks differently with down payment assistance loans, no matter who they're working with. But PCRI is actually using a down payment assistance loan. You're ultimately hoping to do new construction, and that is your plan, but you're not doing a construction loan at this point. So even removing the word permanent, and I hate to be all weird about a word, it doesn't resolve the underlying kind of issue of what we would need you actually to do if you were to choose to do this for, to make a recommendation. You would need to make a recommendation that all down payment assistance loans would need to be equal with the cost of construction. Did I add any clarity, or am I just adding more confusion?
So Leslie Gallo.
I got it.
No, I was just going to clarify one other piece of your question. So we've not changed the allocations that were originally, so the committee proposed 3 something for PCRI and 1 point whatever for and the recommendation was then switched that got 3.3 and PCRI got 1.7. That has not been changed. That is still the same. It's just how those dollars are now spent. So Oz money is predominantly being spent on construction, and that's why that 125,000, whereas PCRI is using theirs on the back end as a down payment assistance. So it's semantics, but that's where the crux of the issue is. Construction, where we're doling out the money to Proud Ground and Habitat versus a loan that actually goes to the home buyer, which is what PCRI is doing. So that's the difference.
But that, in practical terms, I understand what you're saying, and yet in practical terms, one group of buyers has a greater dollar value of assistance toward ultimately being a homeowner. One program has greater dollar value than the other program.
I
per
don't
person.
necessarily think that's the case with an analysis. We have recently received the same breakout from PCRI. We have not had a chance to look at it. But there are differences, you know, despite this issue aside, there are differences in how we do our construction loans from our down payment assistance product. So just to give you background, I'm not trying to influence you in any way, I'm just literally trying to explain a little bit. When we have a construction project, we are doing draws, we are having construction coordinators out on the site, we are ensuring MWESB rates, we are paying on a monthly basis as they bill. A down payment assistance product is something that is more a check that literally goes to the homeowner. We were able to verify that the project needed the funds that they have. We have not looked at and analyzed whether PCRI's project, and we have different financial information. It is a different type of creature. We want to get the homeowners into the houses. We want them to have the same advantages. I would never recommend anything that wasn't treating homeowners, you know, getting the same folks in, but it is a different look that we would do with these two products. It doesn't necessarily relate to PCRI directly, but they are two different types of financial products being used with very different structures and very different oversight by, you know, direct oversight of construction by the Housing Bureau as opposed to a loan to a human. It doesn't make much difference in the eyes of the person, but it does make a difference in the eyes of what we're monitoring throughout the process. So that may be more confusing than you wanted to say, but I'm worried that if you take Linda's recommendation, you know, as you've said with construction, it's actually, because we have one word that was part of the problem in the original recommendation, I'm worried that we wouldn't be solving the same problem. You wouldn't be solving the problem that they're asking you to if you choose to make that recommendation to us.
So Shannon, so what I'm hearing you say is that even though both are going to experience an increase in costs because of housing costs are going up, because one is directed toward the home buyer as a down payment, and the other is directly going into construction, they're different, but what we're really after here is if they're getting more monies in, then they're able to buy down the cost so that all of them are able to better afford, right?
Potentially, when we brought you the analysis back in October, and I apologize, I wasn't here at that meeting, I wasn't sitting in the seat at the time, we had done an analysis of where we believed down payment assistance loans needed to go to get buyers into their homes, and we did an analysis of the construction costs of a construction project, of the actual project that we were speaking of. We have not been able to do that for the numbers that PCRI has in front of
So you
me this
haven't
morning.
been able to take that into consideration through some analysis yet?
We have not, and quite frankly,
so that needs to be done.
I would ask that you would give us time if you were to do that. We would need to really look at some of these numbers. There are differences here between the first proposal, and I agree that construction costs have escalated.
So Shannon, when you say time, is this a significant amount of time you think to go back and crank the numbers?
I think if PCRI and both of us were committed to doing that on a quick timeline, I think we could do that.
Excuse me?
I said I think if PCRI and the Bureau were committed to doing that on a quick timeline, I think we could do that.
I just want for the audience to understand where this history is coming from, because I think it's just important, because I see people kind of looking puzzled. Is that as a committee, we have two pots of money, one on the construction side, which Shannon is talking about, and one on the actual money that goes to the borrower, so the down payment assistance. The committee has made two historical recommendations in the past, which have both gone a little wonky. The reason why Lisa's really asking these questions is that the recommendations we've made in the past have either been overturned or there have been modifications to them. So that's why you're getting sort of, I just want the audience to know there's a pushback. I can give you one clear example. Originally, when we had this down payment assistance fund on just the down payment assistance to the borrower, and I'm giving this to you as well, Shannon, was $80,000. We were then asked to increase it, Sheila, to $100,000.
It initially was 65 that went to 80, and then
yeah, 65 to 80 to 100. Now on the construction side, the same sort of thing. My recommendation to you, Shannon, is to go back and read the history in the notes, because the one thing I can say that's happened since I've been on the committee for 3 years is communication breakdown has happened quite a bit between committee members and PHB staff, community members and PHB staff, and then committee members, and just working with the nonprofits. We just want to make sure that I want to be clear. I'm the same way as Lisa. Is like, who's going to make the final decision? Is what we're doing a total waste of time? I want to be really, really clear, because I think that's really, really important, because it's 3 years and very little of this money has gotten on the street. And as someone that this is my business, I mean, in the same amount of time, I've created over 800 homeowners in the exact same amount of time. And so I know it's a really tough area. I know there's not a lot of housing in that area. I get all of that, but as Marlon said in that meeting, one of the things we discussed is why it is taking a significant amount of time. And so when Lisa's talking about this, who has the final say? Can we make decision-making processes also go a little faster as well, and get it back out to the community and be a little more transparent about it as well?
I think that's the concern that I'm left with in this moment. An analysis can be done. We can come back and have another conversation about a recommendation. This group can make a recommendation which will be maybe align with the ultimate decision or recommendation of PHB, and maybe will align with what council says or not, and it'll be many months from now. And again, it will be, because we don't meet again. We don't meet in 2 weeks. We meet 2 months. So if it's coming here, it's 2 months minimum to have the conversation again. So I'm still back here on this original comment that I made. From the very beginning allocation, there was a decision made to put a greater amount of resources into one model over another model. I believe that communicates a set of values and priorities about what is seen as important in the way that the dollars get spent in one model, in a limited equity model, and a wealth building traditional homeownership model, if that's one of the distinctions that we can make. And if that's the case, then this conversation has to happen at a different level. That's not really a conversation about this spreadsheet or whether this committee is going to do something. We have to have a larger conversation with the people who are making that decision. If what we want to say is, no, actually, we need for the public resources going into this strategy to be about restoring and creating opportunity and access to a traditional homeownership model that's been denied for a long time. And like, frankly, there's not even close to enough money in this strategy or any strategy to make up for history. There just isn't. But that, it doesn't matter if we come back and say, yes, give PCRI more money, and then we go through the same conversation again in 6 months. Like, we have to have the actual conversation. What the actual values. I'm just, that's why I'm asking if that is a situation of the Bureau, if that is a situation of the mayor, of the former commissioner, of other commissioners, that this model is not preferred or is not seen as bringing as much value, someone say that, because then we can have a conversation about that. People can advocate about that. People can go to city council and say, this is important to us.
Perfect. So the question becomes, what are our next steps? It sounds to me like one of the things that will be helpful is to identify a specific time that PHB and PCRI can sit down to talk through necessity. Is that what I heard? Did I understand that? Tomorrow. Okay. So there was an agreement to do that for the execution, right? And then, Dr. Bates, you do raise a very key element for us to interact around and how we handle that or how we address that. I think there is a voice for the Oversight Committee to weigh in at that higher level of conversation. Ultimately, I will say again that elected officials make the decisions. That is the reality of our present government. But it doesn't mean that we don't have voice to influence those decisions.
Just a question, do we know that PCRI is the only organization that's impacted by this? Are we making a decision based on one organization, or is there a broader issue that we need to perhaps be looking at?
And thank you, because you led me into how I'm going to wrap up our moment. Our concern really is for the community member and equity around how funding happens for the benefit of those who are impacted. And that is going to be, and that is what needs to be how we evaluate. So it's not about playing favorites for PCRI or or Proud Ground or any particular nonprofit partner. It is to make sure that the community member benefits and that there is an equitable position for all of those who are participating. That's our approach. So we'll follow up on that.
And Bishop,
Just one last question, if I may, I'm sorry. So the process as you're going back to do the analysis, are you able also to kind of look and see who benefits and who's harmed? I think we would want to see that, and that would help us make a more informed decision as you look at the numbers and see how it shakes out.
We'll be happy to share with you a full report on who else is receiving down payment assistance, what other organizations. I think you also need to know what that effect of this decision, one, is it needed? Two, what are the effects on the other partners or who else may be in the pipeline? But also this would be an increase across the board for DPOW potentially, which would have effects on us looking at other areas of the budget together. So I'll be happy to do as much of that as I can to provide you information regarding that.
Thank you.
Does that answer? Is that what you'd be looking for?
For both Bishop Holt and Shannon, I want this on record because we're on TV too and the community audience is here, is my greatest concern is it's 3 years and very little of this money has gotten out on the actual street. Mm-hmm. And we do have a deadline. There's only, and I think it's really important for Karen to hear this because she's a new member. And I'm really concerned that all of this, I want to call it miscommunication, bureaucracy, will lead to an end result of where this money does not get out on the street. And I just really want us as a committee, and I want PHB to really know that the committee has brought this up as a concern and that it's 3 years.
So, Felicia, you're actually speaking into the very next portion of what this meeting is going to address, those elements. So, before everyone walks away, I would anticipate that before the night is over, there will be a date for a meeting with PHB and PCRI to take it to the next step, right? Be able to set that. Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
And just a reminder, we actually do talk about the Northeast Oversight Committee with Bishop quarterly now, but for a while it was the last 3 months. So during our check-in, we're going to have to go to Dr. Bates's questions and getting specific answers, because that's the time that the interests of the Oversight Committee are brought directly to the mayor and to his chief of staff in regards to the questions that you might all have. So we have the meeting with Bishop. We can additionally invite some of the Oversight Committee members and expand the conversation that way, so you get the chance to directly ask him what he feels about this, what his concerns are, why he did the things that he did. Of course, I give him that information and we directly talk about it in our check-ins, but we'll expand that conversation to include other members.
Thank you very much. We're going to move to our second item, which is in response to the Oversight Committee's annual report. And some of the things, Felicia, you just mentioned, we're going to address now. And Shannon Callahan, the acting director, interim director, is going to be joined by Andrea Mathiasen from the Portland Housing Bureau.
I get to move for one spot.
You do. I'm going to ask you to just turn one on at a time, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Shannon Callahan. I'm director for the Portland Housing Bureau. I wanted to thank you all for allowing us to take time to talk with you tonight about your report and your concerns. As Cupid alluded to, Mr. Alexander alluded to, we meet regularly with Dr. Holt and the mayor to talk about the progress on the North and Northeast oversight strategy, and had a meeting with the mayor shortly before this was scheduled to come to council. The day before it was scheduled to come to council, and we delineated, Dr. Holt delineated the concerns that were in the report as well as the successes. But the mayor was keenly aware that that your concerns were very serious, and he directed the Housing Bureau to work with our partners who are helping us with the work to ensure that we have an action plan going forward. For those of you who may have saw council, he actually literally just did not want us to point fingers at each other, which I think may be something that you have sometimes experienced with miscommunication between both the Bureau, this committee, and our partners as well. So with that tonight, I'd like to give you a little bit of an overview of the steps that we've taken. I have had this interim role since December of this year. I was involved in the early stages of the strategy work for the former Housing Commissioner Salzman, and I take this strategy, the work of this committee, and the work that we promised very seriously. Our staff has gone back with my direction and the support of our other managers and gone through and looked at key areas that we need to make improvements and things that we're going to do going forward. That's not to say that there haven't been things that have gotten us to this point that have been difficult choices as well. I want to acknowledge from the perspective of our partners that we made deliberate decisions to take folks, especially on home ownership, that had never considered home ownership opportunities. And I want to acknowledge on their part that was a choice that was made with the consent of the community at the time. But that also means that folks have more barriers and take a little longer. That is not to say it's an excuse, but I do want to preface that at the beginning. So if you wouldn't mind, we're going to go through, we've tried to condense some of your concerns and talk through what we've learned, what we'll be proposing, and how we'll be monitoring this progress with you and the reports that we'll be providing you. I think that we all need to have very clear information about where we're going forward, and I think they need to be, quite frankly, written reports to this committee, that you're getting information that we're sharing with the community and yourself. So with that. So the first concern that we heard raised was, of course, about the 4 families that have made it through the homeownership process and the clear mistrust and discontent this is causing in the community. The response to you does go through a little bit of history of that decision-making. Part of this was not just for your benefit, but because I knew that this would be read by folks that were not just of this committee and wanted to make sure that they had some background about decisions made. So Andrea Mathiasen is the neighborhood housing teams manager, and I would turn it over to her to talk specifically about the actions and response we'll be taking to this concern.
Thank you. As Shannon said, I'm Andrea Mathias, and I manage the homeownership and home repair programs for the Portland Housing Bureau. And so kind of building off the information that Shannon provided as context, wanted to talk to you a little bit about how the Housing Bureau would be moving forward to address this particular concern with regard to the incomes and credit scores, other mortgage readiness barriers that the Housing Bureau and our homeownership partners are seeing on the part of the families that we're working with. We do want to acknowledge that because the concept of becoming homeowners had not necessarily occurred in concrete terms for some of the households that we're working with, their journey is going to be sometimes a long journey and sometimes an arduous journey working with the skilled homeownership partners and the counseling that they're providing. And so as we reach that 3-year mark of the North-Northeast housing strategy, we do know that a lot of those households are making progress towards becoming mortgage ready and addressing those barriers. And the Housing Bureau wants to be tracking that progress and reporting back to the Oversight Committee. We also want to be tracking it not just through the valuable work of our partners, but through the work of the Housing Bureau staff as well. And so what we're proposing at this point is that the Housing Bureau will survey the households that are participating currently in this process to get their sense of how are the Housing Bureau partners and the Housing Bureau communicating? Are we providing good customer service? Are we being clear in our communication about timelines and the available units? We want to make sure that they're being supported in every way that they can be. We will also be meeting monthly with our homeownership partners to see if there are other barriers that they are identifying that the Housing Bureau can address in more creative and innovative ways. And then I think also we want to be supporting the households in working with either PCRI or the AHA Collaborative. At the beginning of this process, we did ask them to make a choice, and we want to acknowledge that sometimes the choice that was made at the beginning of the process may not 3 years into it be the choice that's best for them at this point in time. I want to pause there and just ask if there's any questions or any additional clarification that I can provide.
Well, one of those that you just mentioned is that's very much a different approach than what had happened. As you said earlier, it had to be a selection that you were either going with the AHA Collaborative or a PCRI. So how is that going to be determined now that it's kind of, it sounds to me like it's in the latter process, or how's that going to be determined?
Well, I think it's on a case-by-case basis, and it would need to be supported in conversation with both PCRI and the AHA Collaborative. So if, for example, PCRI had someone who was of such a low income that they needed to move into a habitat unit, for example, we would ask that they have those conversations.
Say this for the community: 4 homeowners in 3 years. If I created 4 homeowners in 3 years, I'd be fired. This is unacceptable. I'm sorry. As a committee member, I'm just stunned. It's like nobody finds this totally. You have a whole bureau full of staff, and we only have 4 homeowners in 3 years. I mean, this is so, as a committee member, I'm so ridiculously embarrassed. And I don't know how anybody else at PHB is not embarrassed. 4 homeowners in 3 years. If at the Portland Housing Center, if I created 4 homeowners in 6 months, I'd be fired. You know, I mean, we're talking about counseling. I work with some of the toughest people. they don't speak English, for example. Half their family's undocumented. I could create more than 4 homeowners in 3 years. I just think there needs to be a little more accountability, less analysis, something. How are we, I guess as an African American that lives in Northeast, I am ridiculously embarrassed. I don't blame them for not trusting us. And is it that you just don't care?
Perhaps it would be helpful to describe the relationship between the Portland Housing Bureaus and the partners and how the money goes out the door, just for clarity's sake.
So I agree with you, Felisa, and if I just may comment, I agree with you. I take this very seriously. We take this very seriously. We want to make sure that we get homeowners into houses as quickly as possible. I would like to say that we will be working really closely with our partners to make sure that they're meeting key benchmarks, that we're making sure that we're lining up homeowners when they're ready. If we have someone that's ready to move in, we need to make sure that we've got the right slot for them, that we're not creating artificial barriers by the way that we've structured these partnerships. We need to make sure that these partnerships aren't just structured for the benefit of the Housing Bureau or our partners, but for the benefit of the people that we're trying to house. And that's what we'll be doing going forward. I'm sorry I'm not able to answer more specifics about details of money, and I take what you're saying very seriously. Thank you, Felisa.
I came onto the committee in May, I think, of last year, and when I saw the numbers at that time, I was taken aback. But we had a meeting that talked about what were the lessons learned and what were the improvements that we could make to make the system better. And the partners and the Bureau went away and came back in October, I think it was, with some recommendations. And I thought we were all on the same page and going forward in that direction. I too think, because I know of these groups that are out there, that I was taken aback that it was taking that long to get people qualified and through the door and on their way truly to home ownership or access to housing. So I myself tonight even said, well, Shannon, can you go back and work with PCRI and find the numbers so that we can get closer to a justification of what we agreed to back some time ago. I realize that there is a timeline that's coming up, but I think the onus is on all of us. And I would hope that and I'm saying all this to say, I would hope that this committee, in the eyes of the commission and the mayor, will be able to give more weight and credence to what this committee recommends and suggests. And so if that could be taken back and we could figure out a way that we could have that communication and maybe, I won't say politic it, but at least articulate it in a way that can be better understood by the commission and be support for the mayor in taking what the community is saying forward. I think that would be real helpful. I'm not into a beat 'em up match, but I am into us getting it done. And here we are sometime, well, since May, and I'm feeling like we're kind of still in the same place. So, and I know everybody has best intention in mind, but we probably need to step out of our comfort zone and how we're used to doing things and realize here's the first opportunity that we've had to do it from the standpoint of enlightened public involvement, where, again, we learn from the lessons, we give some of the lead to the community in making those hard decisions. And since it hasn't worked in a lot of ways up to now, maybe this is a better approach than what we've been doing in the past. So that was, it's bothersome, but I think it's something that can be done, and I hope this is not going to take a lot of time to get it done. I didn't mean to take you off your presentation, but maybe going forward we can do something like that.
I appreciate it. Let me, I think I need to have a point of clarification, and especially in relationship to what we would all say is an atrocity. The reason why we are here at this moment to talk through these items is that this is a reflection of the report, our annual report, that would have gone to City Council in January. We were requested to postpone it so that there could be specific responses to these concerns. And that is why they're here to present the responses to the concerns we've articulated. The mayor himself requested that and directed Portland Housing Bureau to respond to each of the concerns of the Oversight Committee. So I don't want the community sitting thinking, well, the Oversight Committee does nothing and they're sitting here as figureheads. No, the reason why we're having this discussion is because the mayor said these must be answered, must be addressed, and there must be strategies that address each of these concerns before we then talk about them to City Council. So it's not just a matter of saying these are things that the Oversight Committee is concerned about. It's also saying here are the strategies to address these concerns. So what we're talking about has weight, and this is the response. My thing for us tonight is to say, is this response adequate? Are there questions about this response? Do we need more specifics? So as they go through each particular item, the reason why they're sitting here tonight is to address the concerns we've articulated, and we all are aware of those concerns since we've read our emails. Any question about this response? Is this clear to you? Is this sufficient to you? My concern has been and still is the money out the door and families in units. That's what we sat here for. That's what we committed ourselves to. We want to see community members being successful and becoming homeowners. So is this answering that?
I think we've been having the same conversation about the homeownership programming for the entire history of this strategy. And I am not yet really hearing a solution to a problem, which is not even quite articulated here, which is that it might take someone, I mean, fine, maybe it takes someone 2 years to repair their credit and become mortgage ready, but the models that we have for people to buy a home in this geography, given the prices in this geography, do not appear to work. So that problem has never been really addressed as I see it. We keep incrementally like dribbling a little bit more money toward this program. We have a very finite amount of money overall. We don't appear to be able to get any additional resources leveraged into this strategy. I don't know why that is. When this strategy was first discussed, when it was $20 million, the rhetoric was, we are going to leverage this into $200 million. We are going to bring in, this is going to be huge. And it doesn't, in this arena, it doesn't feel huge, it feels very tiny. It feels like we're actually shrinking because we're going to be able to serve fewer people if we keep incrementally increasing this dollar amount, but we're never catching up to the market. So are we going to, we could survey all the people who are in the pipeline every month, forever. It's not going to solve that problem. What's the bold, what's the new, what's the hard pivot to dramatically change this situation? Or, as I've asked, is the city of Portland simply going to say, this isn't our priority? Given the resources that we have and the suite of problems that exist in the world, making up for the history of exclusion of home ownership for Black people specifically, or people of color more broadly in this city, just isn't what's most important to us.
Anyone else from the Oversight Committee want to weigh in? It's clear that what we've done hasn't worked. That's definitely clear.
I mean, I still haven't heard a straightforward answer to the first concern, which is why there's only 4 families. I mean, you have community partners that you're collaborating with. Is it because their process is quite extreme and long, or is it matching up to what PHB, your process, is that extremely long? So what seems to be the problem? But I haven't heard a straightforward as, here's why we only have 4 families.
So I think, if I may, some of the units are going to be newly built, and so we'll be matching folks up with the units in the process. Individuals are having difficulty in the market finding homes within the small area that the URA actually encompasses for homeowners. They are having difficulty when they are mortgage ready in a market where there are a lot of cash buyers, which is just something that is, unheard of, but it's hard to compete. That said, all 4 of 5 now of the homeowners that we have been suited with down payment assistance. What I can tell you is that I don't know, and I'm just going to be really, really honest here, I don't know that we've been monitoring the way we need to with all of our different partners to make sure that our folks are matched up. Now, I trust and believe my partners, but my job as a funder is to make sure that we're doing what we need to do and we're reporting in that way. I can't tell you right now that I know that there's a dramatic new strategy needed until I match up and talk to each of these homeowners ourselves, and make sure that I know where they are in the pipeline. And this is not about me saying I don't trust our partners. This is about me saying that this is our responsibility, and I need to tell you where we're going. And I think if there's something dramatically different we need to do, we'll come back and we'll talk to you about that, frankly. But for me as the director of the Housing Bureau, I need to get that comfort level with everything that's going on with all of the different folks. And this is not the only concern about home ownership that you've raised to us. You've raised to us concerns that people are getting conflicting information, that they're not being treated well. These are all issues. We are on concern number 1. It's the major concern, but it's something that we need to take ownership of at the Housing Bureau ourselves and make sure that we understand what's really going on. We've promised these 65 folks, right? It's our partners are working with them, but it's our promise. And we need to make sure that we're actively engaging with them too, and we know where they are and where they want to be. And I'm sorry that I don't have a dramatic new answer for you, but that's really what I think I need to get a handle on, and we need to get a handle on at the Bureau right now. So I will tell you if I don't think that we're going to make that, or I think that we have a major problem after we've done this survey and we've talked to these folks, I'll be happy to share that with you. But at this point, I don't know that answer. What I can tell you is we're gonna do the work, and we're gonna monitor where we are. And I know that's probably not real helpful to you, because I'm pretty sure you've heard that before. It sounds like you have. So, but that's what we're trying to say here with this first concern.
I'm not going to go not hysterical, but historical on this. But my concern is not so much you guys going out and surveying the folks as it is making sure your partners and you are coordinating and communicating. Who has your flow? And who knows where the disconnects are in the flow? Because we talked about this last summer. And for me, I think the biggest thing is for there to be an integrated effort where we're not hearing who's at fault and who's not, or even not having a level of trust because people start to perform in doing what they committed to doing. So ideally, in my opinion, is that you guys need to get in a room and figure this out. And it shouldn't be right before or when directed to. It should be something that's an automatic part of this process. The leads from each one of those partners and you need to be sitting in a room and talking about what you did do and what you didn't do and how you're going to fix it. Have a come to Jesus meeting among yourselves and then come back and tell us how you're going to get it done. And keep correcting it, but you're in it together because quite often, from the past, I'm only going to say, it seems that we always do a lot of this. There's a lot of spinning the wheels, and we study it. We have to feel like we got to monitor. Thank you. But we don't necessarily get anything done, and that's my concern. I'd like to see you guys working harder together, coordinating better, and actually learning from the disconnects and improving your process and system so the people that we're all in the room here to serve get the services and the opportunities we all want to see them have.
And I'd love to have some specifics by our next Oversight Committee. Says here are the pieces that we're going to put in place.
Okay, I'll say it. Sheila, we've had this conversation, and Lisa and I will tell you, it's a broken record. The exact same conversation you just had with us, we've now had, and Marlon, please weigh in, for 3 years. It's the exact same conversation that you've just given. And I honestly, I'm just so puzzled. I think there needs to be, if we don't hit a certain number by a certain time, there needs to really be major changes. And I don't actually think it's the agencies. I think it's PHB, because you guys have a ton of people in your housing department, more than, I work with several municipalities. You guys have more than all of them combined. Washington County, Clackamas County, Clark County. So something's happening internally at the Bureau, because these agencies are doing these jobs every day. So I don't actually think it's an agency. I think it's something internal mechanism. And as sitting on other committees for PHB, I can tell you it's not just here. I'm seeing it throughout. And Shannon, you're new, so I mean, I can't say it's you. You're still learning. But I just wanted to say this is, Bishop, we have this conversation every meeting.
Which is why it's in the report, because we're saying that enough, right? We need some results. It's time for results. So we'll go to concern number 2.
So I think we've talked a little bit about the households that the partners are working with, and we wanted to just touch base briefly on the status of the units that are being developed. I think we've kind of pulled that out as the second concern that PHB needs to respond to. Homeownership unit being slow, needing to communicate back to the Oversight Committee about what the status of that development and those timelines are. And so we are at this point very closely tracking the status of 46 out of the 65 units. We have parcels, permits in some cases, pro formas, development timelines. For some of the collaborative units, the Housing Bureau has construction coordinators assigned to those, and PHB is also working very closely with PCRI on their development as well. And so the balance of the units between the 46 that are represented here under the development of the units and the 65 that we've committed to creating our down payment assistance loans. In all future Oversight Committee meetings, we'll be bringing back to you a status report and an update on these development timelines so that you understand in real time whether or not these are on track for completion by these dates or whether or not they've come up against any barriers.
Can you weigh in on the estimated completion dates? Because that's beyond the original timeframe.
That's correct. That is part of what we wanted to bring to the Oversight Committee tonight was a request to review the timelines. Originally, we had proposed a timeline of the end of 2018, and as you can see, these timelines are mid to the end of 2019. Part of that has to do with the realization that some of the home buyers and the households that are in the pipeline are have a longer homeownership journey ahead of them, and the development of the units in terms of their price point and bedroom size, it was desired that they were tailored to those specific households in the preference policy process. And then in other cases, as the memo goes into more detail on, it was really just the identification of affordable parcels of land that were conducive to large enough developments to kind of lend economies of scale, permitting processes, and things along those lines.
Committee members, did you want to weigh in?
Do you have enough inventory now if going through and surveying the current people in the pipeline and 75 of them are all of a sudden ready? Are you able to help place them now?
So at this point in time, we have a certain number of households that are kind of slotted, if you will, towards these units that are in development. And then, almost 24 that we might anticipate would be eligible for down payment assistance, which is where they would go and acquire, existing inventory. And so part of that challenge in using the resources in that way does really become market dependent. I think the scenario we may be facing is the need to identify some more creative or innovative models to support those households.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you could hurry up if you wanted to. You don't have the capacity to house people currently, right?
Well, I think that households who are mortgage ready right now they are being offered down payment assistance loans. And I think as Shannon, briefly referenced earlier, there are challenges. They're competing against cash buyers and limited inventory. And so there are no, at this point, other new development units available for them.
So yes, they'd have to seek down payment assistance loans, and we'd be willing to do that with them.
So did I understand it correctly around the dates that are identified, that we're talking about a request to extend the timeline? A request from us to make a recommendation around extending the timeline, or what exactly?
So I believe at this point, what is being sought is the both clear understanding of the Oversight Committee as well as the support for these timelines. And our explanation is that we, PHB and our partners, are actively working with households to ensure that they are ready by the time these units are completed. And almost equally as important, that they are keenly aware now that these are the units that are being built. What we don't want to have happen is that they become mortgage ready and then realize that these are the units that are being offered them if they cannot afford to buy a house with a down payment assistance loan.
I have a question on this concern number 2. You list the different partners, and you show your estimated completion of those projects, but the one thing that I don't have as a figure is the number of units, so that we know what we're expecting, even if we have to extend the timeline.
Do you mean from the All Collaborative, how many homes, and then from PCRI, how many homes?
Yes. Because I think that would help us to know how much work is involved and whether it's getting any better, or are we just continually moving slow?
So in terms of the All Collaborative, there's 24 units in 2 different projects. And I believe that those have both been presented at previous Oversight Committee meetings. And I think that those presentations are on our website. With regard to PCRI, there's 22 units in 3 different parcels of land.
Okay, so that's basically estimating 46 units, and we've already got 4, so we're going to be up to 50. And then you still have, do you have any idea what's going to happen to the remaining 15 units when that might?
We would hope that they will either be at a point that they can utilize a down payment assistance loan, or the Housing Bureau would support them in using that down payment assistance money in one of our properties that was getting a 10-year tax exemption or an SDC exemption, or any other kind of unit that we are aware is being built for homeownership.
All right, thank you.
So this is not a question specifically to the point of construction. It doesn't seem like there's anything that we can really say about this other than okay. Like, okay, informational. I can't say no. It's just okay, so fine. I would like to know, not at this exact moment, but at some point, in this assessment, in this diagnosis of what is going on, what is going wrong, a report in general from the partners on their performance overall in the universe of homeownership, and understand whether there is something very specific about this that is different from all the other work that they're doing. Are there hundreds of homeowners coming out of the partner, but then one here? Like, what is happening? Because if the programs don't perform at high levels in general, then maybe it just needs to be different programs. I mean, I just don't know. Like, this feels very urgent because we've talked now for 3 to 4 years about there's cash buyers, the house prices, Like, at some point, that is only getting worse, getting much worse. There's no buy the houses. Like, there's houses for sale that can be bought. I mean, someone just buy the houses because that's the only way, right? There was a whole group of us who advocated from the beginning that this PHB, the city needs to take more properties out of the market before the speculation takes them out of reach. You need to move publicly owned land into service for this purpose. You need to buy everything that you can. And that has not happened. It has not happened on any kind of major scale. And I just don't we could go, I know we're gonna go through all of these things, but like there is just a bigger picture, which is that there's a performance issue and it just needs to be diagnosed really clearly. And a lot of this, it's like, we could have said this in January, it would have had the same response, and I would have said, okay, because there's nothing happening. It's just kind of okay.
Can I say something? I think one of the things with the preference policy initially is the individuals who are reached and entered into the preference policy that differs from some of the partners and who they've been working with traditionally. One of the things that Felicia brought up, I believe last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, was the requirement of individuals being at a certain income threshold in order to qualify for getting down payment assistance loans. But when you're looking at the individuals who have been displaced, and the premise and the purpose of the preference policy and reaching out to those individuals, them not being ready should not be a surprise. I know that PCRI was just up here indicating that they had worked for 5 years with a young woman or whoever they had worked with to get them ready to be in a position to purchase. And I know that the individuals who heard of the preference policy and said, this speaks to me, had no idea that they would have the opportunity to purchase a house prior to hearing about the preference policy. So that's part of the conversation that we don't mention, is that the individuals who said, hey, I didn't have the money to stay in this neighborhood, I didn't have the money to work with anyone, I felt intimidated about the whole process, maybe this gets me in the door, is part of the conversation that we're missing out on. Because the individuals who are sitting out there in the numbers or in Yamhill County are saying, I didn't have the opportunity, I don't know how this works, and maybe this is the first time that I get in order to understand this process and to work with these agencies so I can see if I even have the chance in my lifetime of living in an area that I didn't get to live in now. So, I mean, that's a massive part of the conversation, because I know some of the partners are working with these families, and instead of just dropping the families, they're saying, okay, we're going to figure out if you're mortgage ready, which takes some amount of time. And then even though we can't help you and we got to move on to the next family, we're not going to drop you off our list. We're going to use our resources to cultivate you over the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years. So at some point in your life, you're not going to just be paying rent, and you can actually gain some of the equity and not just pay some landlord. So I think that it'd be disingenuous to not mention that as a part of the premise of the preference policy for those who have been displaced and getting into the process.
Appreciate that. So I want to hear from all of the Oversight Committee members in relationship to the dates. Again, our hope and our goal and what we are working toward is that the promises made are the promises kept, and that community members benefit from home ownership. And so, two questions. One question to you. And the first question is, are we confident that these dates are the dates? Are these projections? Are we saying that now if we extend it for a year for then that would be sufficient for the people who are in their pipeline? And if we extend it for a year and a half for PCRI, that will be sufficient for the people in their pipeline. Is that what we're being told?
At this point in time, we believe that these development timelines are the timelines that have been communicated to the Bureau, and we will be getting status updates on a monthly basis from the community partners. In some cases, as I mentioned, the Bureau will be able to check those ourselves. We won't need to check with the partners. We're intimately involved in the development. But I think more to your point is this enough time for the households in the partner pipelines? And, we have been pushing the partners to show to the Housing Bureau in a way that would be available to the Oversight Committee, if so desired, in 6-month increments, where the households are, what are their barriers, and we are tracking the movement of the household through the timeline and whether or not they are addressing those barriers with the support of the partners. And so at this point, we believe that these timelines are adequate for the majority of the households in the pipelines. But mortgage readiness simply means that, you've got the credit and, the savings. It doesn't necessarily determine the sales price point at which you can afford to buy. So I think that, that is ultimately, where we will see households needing additional support.
So when we made the adjustment from the 80,000 to the 100,000, we made the adjustment from the 100,000 to the 125,000, each of us sitting around the table said, we want to make sure that these dollars are getting out the door as quickly as possible. We don't want to have a conversation that says, oops, it's not enough. We're going to need more dollars. My concern is, as we keep pushing timelines, costs are not going down, costs are going up. And we keep talking about the same issue that we've been talking about for 3 years, cash buyers, cash buyers. That isn't going to change in the next 18 months. So if our commitment is to make sure that these people can benefit, what do we need to do so that people can benefit? That's my question. And I just don't think we're getting that answer.
So you made a comment a second ago that just blew me away. You said something to the effect that since it's a cash market, that even folks may not be able to afford a house, even a home with the down payment assistance. So basically they're building units that may become unaffordable to these people?
Not the units that we're building, it's the ones for people that are using just down payment assistance alone, not the buildings that we're subsidizing.
Okay. So, and then my other comment is, Dr. Bates said it, and I thought of it before, but I didn't think it was possible. Why doesn't the city just purchase homes and hold them till folks get approved?
So the Housing Bureau has actually supported some of our partners in acquiring buildings. Proud Ground has purchased several buildings just to purchase and hold them. The two issues that are associated with that strategy that we would need to continue to overcome are the price point of and the condition of the units on the private market. And the city is also up against other cash buyers, but that was initially why that strategy was supported. And then secondly, the holding costs for households that would still need to become mortgage ready.
Cities use eminent domain for everything else. Why not for houses?
Should I write that down? Yeah.
I have a question, if you're finished. Okay, thank you. We talked about the units that you anticipate the partners will be able to have completed. The other piece to that question that will help give us a better feel for where we're at this time is, do you know how many of the people that we're trying to get homes for are going to be ready to complete the agreement and have a home? Are they going to be ready at the end of 2018 or 19?
Our partners tell us that the homeowners that they're currently working with will be able to be mortgage ready to meet these timelines. We also just want to pause and say things happen in life. Life events do happen. However, we believe that the majority of the households with the support of the partners will be able to be mortgage ready and meet these timelines. But I think as we've talked about a little previously, the Housing Bureau will be more actively managing the partners and their relationship with the households than we have in the past.
I think that would probably make sure that Felicia has pointed out and Dr. Bates that we don't end up with just 4 units or 4 homeowners. And I think if we have those type of reports in the loop where your partners report to you, we get that information, then we can better follow and also be told ahead if there is changes in life or something that's going to drop the number of homeowners or cause some of these things to change.
Okay, I should clarify what I'm saying because I don't want the partners to be micromanaged. I want to be really clear. And I don't want the partners to be ending up being the ones being blamed if it doesn't work. I think that I'll say in regards to the preference policy, and I said this at the very, very beginning, it sets partners up for failure when there's people making $12,000 a year that's in this preference policy and their income isn't going to go up to then ask them to buy an interstate. So I think that I've said this in the very beginning, Sheila, I just want you to know, I think there has to be some sort of income minimum so that you don't set the people up for failure and you don't make it virtually impossible for our partners. So I want to be clear that when I looked at the income levels originally of the preference policy, there was a significant amount of them that would never be able to own unless they had a change in job or if they won the lotto. I mean, I'm just going to say it. So I do have to so when looking at that evaluation, Shannon, I think that there needs to be, if we go out again and do the lottery, there has to be some sort of look at income because we have to do it in home ownership, right? Tell me anybody that makes $12,000 a year that can buy a house, but there's people in the preference policy that make 12 to 20.
I think that choices were made in the past, and we did take community input, but I think that's something that we need to look at very clearly for future rounds. I think that we're also setting people up for expectations that may not become a reality, and I don't think that that's actually something that is helpful in any way, shape, or form. I don't want you to get the impression from my statements that I think we're trying to micromanage our partners, but I do think we have multiple partners and we have multiple lists and we have different people on different lists with different homes at different stages. And I do think it is my job to ensure that the money that we are putting out there or committing with partners in cooperation with them, but making sure that we're lining up the people. And, this is the program that they are the ones and getting folks into homes. I will not deny that in any way, shape, or form. But I do take my responsibility seriously to know what's going on with those folks in the pipeline and making sure if we could move them from one place to another or learn lessons about what's going on, that it's not just our partners doing the work, but that we take ownership of the work. So, we need to work with them very closely. And I do believe we need to increase communication with them and you.
I agree with you in terms of the need to be more involved and more on top of what's going on, and having strong expectations of the partners as well as yourselves. And that I don't want the thing that I'm just concerned about, because having been out here for a few decades now, there's always, there is a culture, if you will, for bureaucracies. And some of them are able to think outside the box and see a good opportunity and a concept, but the minute you start bringing it in, it takes the life out of the ability for it to work for the people that they're trying to help. And so I would like to see it be something where, again, it's a collaborative partnership where you're both in it together and you either fall or fly together. And it's not a case where you can blame one or the other. And the demand is for both to perform. So that means not looking at it as I got to take this over and monitor it so much as I got to lead and produce results. Does that make sense? And maybe I'm hearing it differently. But I think it's a great opportunity for you guys to do just that. And this will be a first for us if we can get it done.
And I also want to be clear, I'm a huge fan of the preference policy. I don't want anybody to think I'm not. I think our preference policy, we got to give kudos because PPS just took it on for the right to return. So there's a bunch of people that can come back to go to Boise and Tubman and everything. So I want to be really, really clear. But even within the preference policy, it was our original pilot. There can be changes made. So I just want to be really clear. I don't want anybody to think I want the preference policy to go away either, because I think Matt and his team have done an incredible job. I think it was a huge risk, but I think it was one of the best risks we've taken in the city.
Okay, we're going to move to concern 3.
Concern 3, the policy regarding the repayment of DPAL, otherwise known to others as down payment. Am I not on the right one? No. Oh, I was hoping to skip a concern. Look at me. Policy, how did I? Okay, well, thank you for that. Why don't you do that one then?
So I think this concern primarily gets at feedback that the Housing Bureau has heard from the Oversight Committee, as well as individuals directly in the community expressing frustration, confusion, very strong emotions with regard to not the preference policy itself, but the Bureau's implementation of the preference policy. And so I think the Bureau would like to simply acknowledge that we have heard that feedback, and we take it very seriously, and we are constantly in the process of following up with households who provide that feedback, and I think, as we mentioned earlier, would like to be increasing the Housing Bureau's contact and communication with preference policy households, not to micromanage the work of our partners, but to make sure that they understand that it is indeed the city's implementation of the preference policy, and that we do feel that responsibility for their understanding of how they're moving through it and the options that are available to them through homeownership subsidies.
I also think there's a lot of confusion about the preference policy, and what we feel very strongly is that we need to have shared communication tools. I think that everybody in the community may have a different take on what the preference policy is, how it works, who gets preference, and I think we need to make sure that we collectively are all sharing the same set of communications regarding the preference policy. And I think we know we can do a better job expressing what both the intent of and what it is in practice.
Thank you very much. It would be great to see what that looks like as soon as possible. So let's go to concern 4.
So this is a concern that you raised about the structure of the down payment assistance loans, and what happens if a family were to remain in the home after 30 years of ownership. You were concerned and recommended that there would be a change in the Portland Housing Bureau policy not to create an additional burden on families that had already been displaced, and would like a program that forgives the loan over the course of 30 years. And the short answer is we agree. We will be, after doing a very extensive analysis, which I know we probably didn't need to do, but it was helpful for us as a team to do, we believe that we should recommend a modified structure with complete forgiveness after year 30 and starting at year 15. So with that, we will be finalizing our recommendation, bringing that both to this committee and to our Portland Housing Advisory Commission, because we would be intending that the down payment assistance loan product would change citywide, not just for this URA. And then we would be bringing back that program model to City Council for implementation.
Fantastic. I think that's great. I think that's worth clapping about. I don't know if everybody heard what she just said. So that's the forgiveness of the DPAL. Which was one of the major concerns. Actually, it's what we spent the majority of our time on in the October meeting, was our concern about this putting an extra burden, which is probably why we don't remember the other part. But we spent the majority of our conversation around this in the October meeting. And so to me, that's super exciting, that people will not be added with an extra burden. So in essence, if you stay in your home, that's $100,000 that you benefit from immediately. That's fun. That's fantastic.
For the audience, that falls in line with other municipalities as well. Gresham has a program like this. Clackamas has a program. So I didn't want to be a broken record, but I am so happy that all of my complaining over the last 3 years is finally given in. So I especially want to say thank you to Javier, because you've had to listen to me complain about this. So I am thrilled, because this really makes a difference for families to have the forgiveness. I mean, it really does.
Any other voices from the Oversight Committee?
Kudos to the team.
Concern number 5.
Did you push your button first? Do you want to do it? All right, fine.
This concern had to do with the 2017 home repair loan program outcomes that were included in the annual report, both in terms of the number of loans that were reported, but also in terms of the equity outcomes that were included compared to the previous year, the 2016 report. And so in looking at both of these issues, the Housing Bureau has made several different program modifications. The initial modification being that the way the loans were being captured to be reported needed to be modified somewhat. They were not, the way the reporting mechanisms were structured, it was not capturing units that were close to completion or in the pipeline. And so we want to make sure that we're reporting to the Oversight Committee all of the pipeline production volume. And so, for example, had we structured them slightly differently, you would have seen an additional 22 loans in the pipeline. We have also kind of recalibrated the home repair loan program budget to the staffing that the Housing Bureau has to administer the home repair loan program, so that we don't have resources that are sitting there unexpended, but we should have those resources available in future years for allocation to the program. And then lastly, in terms of who the program is serving, in 2016, we did a lot of very community-based outreach, convening a number of events in the community, a lot of kind of grassroots outreach, and then we defaulted to business as usual, doing kind of mailings, if you will, and so wanting to acknowledge that the difference and the impact that that had and who we served. So getting back to really working more closely in the community to ensure that the people who we want to most be serving with the home repair loan program are aware that it's available. And we anticipate in the coming year that we can, we envision 50 home repair loan projects annually that we would have completed in North and Northeast.
Just a quick question related to this. As a Bureau, are you partnering with other entities like the county's home repair and weatherization program and Prosper Portland's home repair programs to make sure that you're leveraging their outreach along with that you'll be doing directly into the community and their dollars?
So we work closely with the county weatherization program in terms of being able to incorporate their weatherization activities and services and dollars for the households that we work with. We don't always have the same alignment of income eligibility requirements, but when we do, we definitely work together. And also for Prosper Portland resources, the Housing Bureau does make those available in the community for households that are above our income requirements. So we work with households 80% AMI and below, and then we use Prosper Portland resources to go from 80% AMI to 120% AMI. But I do think making sure that we are working closely with the county weatherization program around outreach strategies is an appreciated suggestion.
And the other thing is that the technical assistance and support, because the home repair program is a good source of seniors and low-income people in our community who need some assistance with not only upgrading their property but so that they can stay in it, but to understand what are their options to keep that property. And so I know I mentioned this back when I first came on board and we were talking about this, but is that component in this process so that there's technical assistance for those families to learn about estate planning, or if they are in a household where maybe grandma has had the taxes deferred, what they can do to, if grandma passed, options that they have at the state level to be able to keep the home and the family?
So the Housing Bureau has a holistic goal of helping to stabilize households, and part of that work means incorporating information about other programs that would help to stabilize the current occupant. Where we have room to do more work is to better support the family in how to use that home to the best of their intentions, whether that's keeping the home in the family or however they desire to use it. And so I think we have a little bit of work to do there. The support that we provide around title issues, estate issues, taxes are all for the existing occupant, but not for how kind of a subsequent family member or generation might want to use the home.
Well,
does that answer your question?
Part of this is about the legacy of keeping the family in the home, and so I would hope that this is something that we took to the Housing Bureau under the ICRAC when I was chairing the ICRAC as a real need, and for 3 years we went through this process you guys have talked about, and we could have saved a lot of households during the flight we had 7 to 8 years ago if we'd acted then. So I'd hope that we figure out a way to include that.
The only other question I have is in relationship to the 50 home repair projects. You kind of referenced it. What specifically, what gauge, what measurement in terms of making sure that it is the people who are most impacted that are benefiting, specifically people of color, right?
In terms of our outreach strategies?
Yeah, your outreach strategy, how you're going to track it, all of that.
So we are carefully tracking both the actual strategy, but then also counting the number of applications that come in response to that strategy, and looking at them very closely to see was that a successful outcome in terms of serving communities of color from North and Northeast.
Because the whole purpose around this strategy is to prevent displacement, right? It's a mitigation strategy. We want to make sure that that's how it's used. Now, anybody else want to weigh in? Any other voices from the oversight? All right, concern number 6.
Concern 6 is concerns about the Reach Argyle rental development site, and that the project was not proposed, still is proposed as was in the NOFA, and that the committee recommended reconsideration of this project and these dollars. So the Argyle project is not the same as was originally submitted in the NOFA. They have continued to make revisions based on this committee's concerns, including yours, Mr. Holmes. At the last meeting, you raised specific to the family-sized units. At this point, we would ask that we give you a full presentation on the status of the Reach Argyle project at your next meeting to make some determinations and look at some trade-offs together. They are applying to the state to fill their gap for the development, which will they have a few $1 million gap to complete the project. If the state comes in and fills that, I think it may be an entirely different discussion than if they are still facing a large gap in May. But we would ask that they would have a chance to present where they are and what they've been able to accomplish since the last time they spoke with you. And we have also asked them to do a proposal which would include an option B. If they did not get the funding to fill their gap, would they do, what would a phased development look like? It is a significant number of units. It is a project that could be shovel-ready rather quickly, and we'd just like to make sure that we talk through all the trade-offs with you. We're aware of the concerns that you raised regarding the commercial, the design, the family-sized bedrooms, I think, being one of the most key that we heard, and Breach has heard that as well. So we've had a number of meetings with them since that point, and we'd like the chance to bring it back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're amenable to that, to have that presentation in our May meeting. It was brought to my attention in regard to the home repair that there are flyers or information around the home repair here tonight. Is that correct? Okay, in the back. So if you know of or know of someone, or if you can benefit from it, want to make sure you get that information. So as we're wrapping up this moment, there are two things that are happening. One is, I believe we have a date and time certain where the report, the annual report, will go before City Council, and that will be in April. And so the report as it stands, identifying our concerns with the opportunity of responses to those concerns, will be presented in April. And that's at 10 o'clock, City Council for all who would want to attend. And then secondly, in relationship to tonight, I think there were some asks that happened in relationship to the conversations. There were some specific things that we asked, and I want to make sure that those get captured and are responded to, right? So that as we talk through each concern, especially the early ones, one was the engagement meeting with PCRI, right? And doing that and being prepared to say, this is how we're going to resolve this issue, this is what we found, this is what we're going to resolve, and then each concern was outlined, and we identified specific things. I want to make sure that we capture that. It would be great to have that response in our next meeting as well.
I will also commit to writing down what we believe were our deliverables from this evening after this with the staff tomorrow to make sure that we're on the same page, just so that we don't miss anything in communication. I will admit I was listening to you more than I was able to write stuff down, so I want to make sure I've captured what you're looking for.
I wanted to make an overall comment about this report process and also perhaps another request. On the request side, I think that we really need to look at an overall budget for this entire strategy and understand where all the money is now. We've added and filled gaps here and there, and I think we really need to understand what the total spend down is and what the opportunities are going forward so that we can make sure if we need to reorient ourselves in different ways that we can do that. But I just want to share that I was actually extremely disappointed that this report was pushed back from the January council meeting. I do not think that that demonstrates a strong sense of accountability for the work. And I find it frankly very insulting that the reason was given that there would be fingers being pointed in all directions. I think that we are adult enough to provide a report of accountability and have a conversation about that. If folks needed to come back months later with the response, which is essentially what's happening now, that's fine. But to be able to speak publicly, to share to council what the report was flatly on its own, I think is an important function of this committee. And I found it disturbing to hear that that was being pulled. I have stated before, and I'll say again, I do not think that the mayor is sufficiently engaged with this work as the housing commissioner. And I found that to be a dodge that does not look good for us as an oversight committee. I don't think it looks good for the Bureau. And I'm glad that we now have a time certain and a date certain, and if it gets pushed back again, it will be exceedingly upsetting. This is a strategy that has now been in the international press, not just the Willamette Week. It's been in the international press, and we have a responsibility to deliver these reports and have these conversations out loud and in public in a timely way.
Thank you, Dr. Bates. Any other voices from the Oversight Committee? Thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right. We've moved to our moment in the agenda for public testimony. And if you would like to weigh in, I need you to fill out a card so we can capture your name and your thought. We're going to begin with Andrea Debnam. You will have 3 minutes to share your thoughts, and that's anyone who comes to the podium.
Again, my name is Andrea
Your time starts
Debnam
now.
with PCRI. And gosh, there's so much I could say, but we only have 3 minutes. I think I totally understand the frustration that Felicia brings to this in terms of how many people have actually successfully gone through this process. And I just want to acknowledge the fact that when PCRI began and looked at this as an opportunity, we looked at it as an opportunity to support families that we have been working with in our organization who actually represent the intended group of individuals that this policy intends to serve. PCRI has created their own right to return policy, which has done the very thing that the preference policy is trying to do, and that is create opportunities for individuals that have been displaced from this community. Our organization was born out of a crisis and have been mitigating the displacement of African Americans in this community for 25 years. We have a relationship with people in this community. We continue to serve those that are at risk of that. So when we came to the table, we thought, here's an opportunity to get resources to serve people that this policy intended to serve, and was told that everybody had to go through a different process in order to be eligible for these resources. So when I think about the fact that here we are sitting and we only have 4 people that have become homeowners, it didn't have to be that way, because we actually had people at the time when we submitted our application that we were saying, here's some resources that we could use to support them. What we don't need, certainly what I don't need, is the Portland Housing Bureau to micromanage a process by which we have done very, very well for a very long time. What I need the Housing Bureau to do is stay out of the way so that we can do the work that we know how to do, and that they make resources available for the people that we serve that are people that have been displaced or at risk of displacement from this community. So as we move forward and you begin to evaluate the preference policy, I'd like us to consider how we can make some changes to that, because we have people today. We had people a year ago, we had people 2 years ago, we had people 3 years ago that could have benefited from these resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Doyle. Yes. Come on up, come on up, come on up, come on up. Thank you, sir. Hi, Debbie. If you'll push your button, you've got 3 minutes starting now.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Doyle. I'm a native of Portland, Oregon. I'm honored to be a tax accountant, so I prepare taxes. So I know what high wealth individuals report, and I know what low-income individuals report, because I have the honor of doing it on both ends. I know that people of color don't have money to buy a house. I cry at night. My husband has to talk me out of leaving our small little tax clinic from doing taxes for people who don't make above $65,000 a year. Every year, they have a family. And then I go to work the next day and I do high wealth individuals who gift their children $50,000 down payments. And we all know about gift tax returns. You can give people money, and the government is okay with that. These people don't stress. These kids don't stress about their down payments. And even mom and dad will give them $10,000 to furnish that home. What am I saying to you? Is that these stipulations, these guidelines that you have, it reminds me of slaves who had to save their money, enough money to be free. And then the master that owned them said, oh no, I changed the rule. Now you have to do this, and now you have to do that in order for your freedom. Oh, you can only afford to pay for your freedom. Your wife and kids have to stay here. There's always a barrier that my community does not put in front of themselves to be free. What I'm saying to you is that unless you, like Andrea said, get out of the, Portland Housing Bureau gets out of the way and allow people who have built this country to become a homeowner. We have to beg to become homeowners now, really? That's interesting. What I'm saying to you is that if you wait until these people have the money to be able to afford to purchase a home, it's not going to happen. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Demi. Is this Deja? Deja Abel. Hi, Deja. It doesn't matter. You can sit right there and just put that one up.
Okay.
And you've got,
Oh, do I?
yeah,
Oh.
you've got 3 minutes.
Okay. I wrote down my notes because it's hard for me to like remember everything. But going back to the proposal that was changed, or the proposal that was changed, I feel like the decision impacts me directly because I'm on the preference policy, and I'm also I chose to be in PCRI's program. I had chose which home ownership program I wanted to be in, and what was proposed at that time was $80,000 for the development of a newly constructed house. I chose PCRI. Then there was an increase to $100,000 loan down payment assistance. For this not to happen, I feel would be very unfair to myself and others who chose to be in PCRI homeownership program. If this, the process for me has been very confusing. I got a letter to choose a program. I think it was from the Portland Housing Bureau, or no, I think it was. And then I also received another letter to look at some condos. And then I went to see about other homeownership programs that Portland Housing Bureau had suggested I look at before choosing. And the process has just been very confusing for me. So I'm just now getting to a place, I'm also just now getting to a place where I am in the position to be able to buy a home, but it has taken me a while through the process to prepare. But this year I will be ready to purchase a home. But I know that without being in one of these programs, I would have been one of those intimidated people, I can't buy a house. So I am very thankful that the programs exist. But I definitely know that there's other people who, if they were here, they would say the same thing. So I wanted to share that with you guys.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you very much. And if you can hang around, I want to chat with you. Thank you very much. Travis Phillips. Got 3 minutes.
All right, sounds good. Pleasure to see you all again, and thank you for being here and putting in the time for this, because I know it's getting late. Wanted to address a couple things. I know one of the concerns that the Oversight Committee has expressed over time is the communication and the information you get. I know we talked about that a little bit this evening, and I want to say, and I've expressed this to Director Callahan as well, that I think one of the challenges here is that the information you get comes at you once every 2 months from us as partners inside of a 5 or 10 minute presentation, which is a really difficult opportunity to be able to discuss and explain and understand the complexities and the nuance of the work that we do, both with the clients we work with and on the developments we do. And so what I've expressed to Director Callahan is I'd like to see if there's another way that we can have this communication or figure out different pieces of information that you all feel like you're not getting or whatnot, so that we can better understand what we're all doing here and what the opportunities and the successes and the challenges are. I'll be really quick here, but I did want to hit on a couple things that were discussed this evening. I know, Felicia, you mentioned 4 homeowners in 3 years. And we're talking really, that's just of the folks who have come through the preference policy application. We as partners submitted our applications for those funds in November of 2015. The first clients from the preference policy came through our doors as partners in November of 2016. So it's not been 3 years that we've worked with these individuals, it's been 16 months. And these, as we've talked about, are the people that have been most negatively impacted through city investment and displacement and eminent domain. And so it's 16 months of some of the people who have had the greatest challenges to homeownership. During that time, we've continued to work with other home buyers and put people into homeownership. So our work has not stopped in the time period that we're talking about. It's just with this particular bucket of money. Dr. Bates, I wanted to address really quickly your comment about leveraged funds, and specifically as it has to do with homeownership. The amount of money that has been reserved for down payment assistance for the buyers that we're serving is about $1.76 million. That is leveraged into a $4.5 million total investment into those homes through the grants that we're bringing to that, through the buyer's mortgages and a whole bunch of other resources. So that money is being leveraged and is one thing that we haven't had an opportunity to really talk about in this setting. And the last thing, Sheila, in talking about the home repair and leveraging, I know the Bureau talked a little bit about what they've done. I think it's important also to recognize what we as partners are doing. PCRI, for example, working with the state, Community Energy Project, Care Oregon grants, and then also making sure that our suite of programs to educate folks about how they stay in their homes, how they pass it down to their families, what the tax benefits are, making sure that they understand all of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. John Washington. Absolutely.
Good
Got 3
evening,
minutes.
Board. 3 minutes. Wow. You know, hi, everybody.
Hi.
You know, I'm so glad to see all you people sitting on these tables right now. I really am. I mean, you know, we got the top of the rung here sitting at this table. But there's a couple things that I heard earlier that sort of disturbed me, and I just wanted to sort of encourage you folks a little bit. This whole question of impotence, you know, rather not if you got strength or you got influence or whatever you got, you know, and it just led back to my thought is about an upright back can't get rode. And I say that only to say is keep up the pressure. You know, you just don't take your foot off the lion's neck for a second when you got him down. You just keep your foot on it and you keep pressing, okay? The other thing was about this 15 to 30 year forgiveness aspect. You know, when we give people an opportunity to get ahead, we should give them the opportunity to get ahead. And we should stop at about 15 years. Because, you know, people got kids going to college or whatever the case is, and 30 years out, you know, encumbering your money and all that kind of stuff, it's just not right. So you stop at about 15 years. And the last thing is that these thoughts that people continue to give you is tactical realities. For example, suspension, or this fact of we don't know what we're going to do next and how to get there. That's tactical. Okay? So you got to make sure you pay attention to that aspect of that and you push through that reality. So anyway, folks, I really am proud of y'all all. Sheila, all of y'all docs. Y'all keep going what you're doing, and I do appreciate that, you know, and y'all do this. You hear?
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. As we wrap up tonight, any thoughts or closing comments from the Oversight Committee members first?
I live in Northeast. This is my community. Leslie lives in Northeast. This is her community. Bishop grew up in Northeast. I just want you to know we are Cupid lives in Northeast, Lisa lives in Northeast. Almost everybody on this committee either lives in Northeast or were born in Northeast. John really did say it. We passionately care. And I ask you people in the audience, hold us accountable. And don't be afraid to do it. Hold us accountable and hold the people you elected accountable, and don't allow the excuses of bureaucracy to get away. And I just say continue to hold us accountable.
I just wanted to clarify one comment that I made about leverage, because Travis and PCR, all the partners, I understand that they are bringing in additional dollars to complete their projects. They have to, because there's no way that city resources are sufficient. What I was sold and told upon being asked to join this effort was that the capital C City of Portland was going to be promoting an innovative new approach to degentrifying a neighborhood, a whole district, to racial justice, that this was going to be talked about nationwide, foundations, private investors, right? Big, that's the leverage that I was referring to. That this was going to be work that was going to be such a significant stamp on the mark on the city and the world, and repairing harms that have been done, that money was going to be pouring in to support the work. And I haven't even seen that. I haven't seen anything that looks like that. I haven't seen an elected official or a foundation CEO or people standing arm in arm saying, look at what we're doing and we need more money. And I look at other cities that are working on work like this, and they've got philanthropic and private sector partners coming to the table with very significant amounts of money. And at the end of the day, that's part of what the problem is here. There just aren't enough resources. So how can we do that? How can we move this, if this is meant to be a signature piece of work of the city of Portland, a signature piece of a racial equity strategy, of anti-displacement work, then let's make it be that.
This has been a very interesting evening. I appreciate that we had, I think that's the most public testimony we've had so far, at least for the meetings that I've attended. And so I'm appreciative of that. The idea that we do need to hold each other accountable. And when we come to a position that we say is for the benefit of the community, that we as well as the community can be supportive of that. And like you were saying earlier, and I call it the politic of it, but being able to articulate those things to the people who do make the final decision, or have them to understand and feel comfortable with the work that we've done and the positions we've taken is very important in the process. The other thing is, I want to say to the Housing Bureau, it was a tough night tonight. I think I would most want you to know that we know we're in this together, and we need you to be able to have that kind of public-private partnership that will attract some of the leveraging that the doctor over here was talking about, and being creative and thinking outside the box and finding ways to partner with your partners to have an attractive approach that we could take to foundations, or be able to get private entities who value what you're doing and their foundations to participate. And I think that's another piece of this, an opportunity that we should force. And we need to look at the Federal Register every once in a while to see what's on that, because that can be effective too.
I know you're fairly new in your role, but there's a saying, when you know better, you do better. And I hope that what you've learned from this evening has increased your knowledge, and so we can expect that we will get better results from the Housing Bureau.
First, I want to say, I say it on a regular basis, and I will again articulate how much I appreciate the commitment of each person who sits on this committee. Thank you very much for giving your time to this work. It is a heavy lift. There is no simple solution to the problems that are in front of us, and I think we have to keep doing what we're doing. Personally, I am not discouraged, nor am I frustrated. The fact that we exist, to me, is a profound reality, and the fact that we're able to do what we did tonight is significant and needs to keep happening. Second thing I will say, just in general, is in terms of leadership. Leadership is exactly that. It is going out front, it is being out front, and oftentimes it is misunderstood, misinterpreted, and you deal with the hits. You deal with the impact of being misinterpreted. But hopefully, what a leader does is keep their eye on the goal, keep their eye on the task. And no matter how they're interpreted, they keep moving forward. And so I say on a regular basis, for me, this is about promises made being promises kept. Our commitment is to the benefit of the community members that had promises. Felicia, you said, and I will reiterate, I'm native. I've lived here. I've seen the difference. I grew up on Williams and Wygant. I know what Williams and Wygant once was, and I know what it is now. I know that when I grew up, if you saw a person who was Caucasian running, it meant something bad was happening. That's not what it means today. And I know what has happened to the communities and the neighborhoods and the economic opportunity and the dynamic of a sense of place and space. What I want to see happen is the people who've been impacted benefit from the dollars that have been allocated. That's what we're committed to. So there are going to be times when it's uncomfortable. Going to be in times when we're misinterpreted and people have questions and people have feelings and perspectives about us. I don't really care. What I care about is that the promises that were made are the promises that are kept. So thank you tonight for your time. I appreciate your energy and your effort, and we are going to keep our foot on the lion's neck. Have a good night.